Okay, I have no idea where the plane ticket came from. There was no return address on it. I opened it up and there was a plane ticket in it, a free plane ticket to go any place I wanted. And by this time in my life, I had learned not to doubt things that came into my life, just to take them as a message. So I thought about where I'd want to go, and I had a friend who had met some people from Mexico, and I thought, well, we'll have someone down there that we know since we don't speak Spanish. And so I called her up, and she said, when do we leave? So I booked the ticket, and it was to go, I was living in Florida at the time, so it was to go from Miami straight to Mexico City. Well, the plane got canceled, and we ended up going from Miami to Los Angeles, the city of angels, which was an interesting sign, down to Mexico. And I had made all kinds of flights and reservations at hotels, etc., etc. And when we got off the plane, the head Aztec dancer met us, and he said, I've canceled all your reservations. And it was like, okay, I guess by that time I didn't react to things that happened. I just knew it at that point in my life that whatever was happening was supposed to happen. So he said, we'd like you to stay with us unless you think we're too poor. So, what are you going to do? Offend somebody and say, I can't stay with you?
Right.
So that's how I got to Mexico. And from there, it was one wild ride. These are called alley houses at the time. I don't know if they exist anymore. But on one side of the alley, there was the kitchen, then the living room, then the bedrooms. And you had to go out the door, walk down the alley, and go in the door to get into the next room. And our bedroom was clear at the end. And of course, then the kitchen, the stove, and everything was on the other side of the alley. So it was very interesting. It was a whole different concept but it was cheaper to buy alleys and build your houses in them than to buy land at that time. So when we got to the bedroom, which was their best bedroom, one of the things among Indigenous people is that if you have a guest, you give them the best. And so they gave us this beautiful bedroom with a brand new bedspread, which was a great honor because they didn't have much money. And as we went into the bedroom, a rat ran across the floor. And at that time, I had hired an interpreter who saw the rat, and she immediately left and deserted us and went back home. But for me, whenever I see a rat, it's not a scary thing. It's a message. For me, the rats bring messages. And so I knew that from that point on that this trip was going to be incredible. And I just sat there and laughed and laughed and laughed. First of all, I didn't do anything. That's the first thing to remember, is that Spirit does it. I have found that as I move into other countries, that if I allow the culture and the spirits of that culture, who are healers, to come into my body, I am channeling their capabilities and also instantly know all the cultural things to do. So when this happened, I had no idea what I was doing. But the young man that had canceled all of our reservations said, don't worry, you'll know what you're doing. So I just moved on. And what happened was a miracle. It was absolutely a miracle. But all I did was to listen, allow that spirit to direct me, and do what I was told. And that was the secret for me. Of course, I ended up burning some of my hair and eyelashes. But other than that, why? But yeah, it was an incredible experience. Be glad to. First of all, it was not a medicine man. In South America, they're called curanderos. So it was a curandero, and he took me into the woods, and we walked a ways, and there was a pit there with steps going down in it. And he told me to walk down those steps. And as I did, I began to transform into a black jaguar. And the book goes into details about that. But what was amazing later, as we were walking down a shop area or a place where you can buy things, I said to him, I said, you know, I'd really like to have something to remember this experience from. And he said, do you really want it? And I said, yes. So he reached out and he clicked his fingers, and this is what he handed me out of thin air. It's very, very heavy, appears to be made of iron, but it is a black panther. And it reminds me of that energy, and it sits on my altar and in the medicine area that carries. So this panther carries me. That experience is always with me. But what was amazing was the fact that he just clicked his fingers and produced it out of thin air.
Wow.
And when I talk about perceptions and other dimensions, and it's beyond your imagination. Before I went to Mexico, I had no concept that people could put their arms through walls or pull things out of the air or disappear or guide me into other realities or other lifetimes. And so when you begin to open up to that and you realize that I'm not special, I just trust. I trust Spirit. I trust Spirit to guide me. Now, it's important to know what's Spirit and what's just other beings that are telling you what to do, or if it's your ego. It's important to have that feeling in your heart or a space around your head where you know that it's Creator Spirit talking to you and not some other entity. But yeah, this is my Black Panther.
Wow.
And I've had him looked at. He's very, very old. It's not something that was produced in recent times. Yeah, I had been very sick in Mexico. I got Montezuma's revenge. At least that's what I thought it was. It wasn't in the other dimensions. It was something totally different. But I was very sick, and I was homesick. So as we are heading back to Mexico City, I said to the Curandero, all I want to do is to sleep in Florida tonight. And he looked at me with a grin on his face, and he said, you will. And that really made me upset because, you know, I'm in the middle of Mexico. How can I get back to sleep in Florida? So we're driving along, and all of a sudden I look up, and we're on a deserted road, no other buildings, but right there on that road is the Florida Motel. So I ended up sleeping in Florida. And those are the kinds of things, you know, that happen. Some of them are really funny. And I understood at that moment that whatever we say, doesn't matter what it is, we create it. You know, I said it, but it doesn't always come through the way we are thinking of it, you know, becoming reality. Spirit hears it and gives it back to you in the way that Spirit interprets it. And so the bed was lumpy and there were mirrors on the ceiling and a few things like that that was very interesting. So in the book, I say, when reality shatters, we have an opportunity to walk through a new portal. And I walked through that portal of understanding that if I said it, it happened. But it happened in Spirit's way, not my way. And I think you go through stages with that. The first stage is I create my reality. That's the first stage. And you understand that everything you say, everything you think, every action you take creates a reality on this existence. And the next stage is realizing that when you trust Spirit, Spirit interprets those affirmations, as a lot of people do, and gives them to you the way Spirit sees them. And then that becomes a little bit more challenging because sometimes they connect between what's happening, and Spirit kind of feels like it's a challenge to connect. For instance, one time I was driving home from one of the educational speeches, and I was praying. I said, Spirit, keep us safe. And as we went to turn onto a road, my transmission fell out. Just fell out. No reason. So I called, the automobile club. And we waited and we waited and we waited 2 hours for them to get there. And finally, this state patrol pulled up and he got out of the car and he said, may I help you? And I said, I think so. I said, our transmission fell out. And he looked at me and he turned sheet white. He said, you are so lucky. He says 2 miles up the road, there was a 20-car pileup and several people died.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
So I could have gotten angry about the transmission. I could have gotten frustrated. My sister was with me. She did. She got very angry and upset, and she was hungry and it was hot. But it's making those connections. It's understanding that that Spirit always has your back and Spirit always has your greater good. Period. So it's up to you to say, oh, that's what that was. One of the portals in the book, and remember that these were dictated to me, goes like this. Walk gently through the lives of your ancestors, where time does not exist. In the stillness of your being is the center of creation. So when you remember that you literally are a piece of Creator, that you were created out of love by Creator, then you begin to remember who you are. And that when you connect on that level, when you understand that, then Creator, the spirits can speak through you more frequently and with a lot of ease. It's the same thing when I was trying to learn to love myself, and I didn't love myself at one time. And someone said to me, "You've got to learn to love yourself." Well, I went in here and I tried and I tried and I tried to love myself, and it did not work. So I began to look out there all around me, and I would see situations where there was kindness, compassion, love. And I saw them out there, and I began to acknowledge them. So I was seeing love. I just wasn't loving myself yet. And so as I began to do that, love began to walk towards me. And I began to see more and more and more. And then I began to see people giving me love. But it still wasn't inside me. I still didn't love myself. And then I saw love walking beside me, where I began to give people love and kindness and compassion. And that's when love moved inside me, and I became love. But it's not always just like this. Sometimes it's a process. But whatever you see in your world becomes you. And whatever you think and say becomes your reality. So it's that circle, it's that medicine wheel, it's that spiral that is continuously working, that what you put out, what you see, comes right back to you.